Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Ryan Cherry. And Ryan and I are going to be talking about his book, Readback, a Marine Aviator's Manual for Navigating Life's Hardest Lessons. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. Love the book. Some great lessons in there that we can all learn. Ryan, where can people find information about you?
Yeah, so the easiest places, the two primary places you can find me would be on LinkedIn, Ryan Cherry. I'm on there. And then also my website is ryancherry.com. You can find me there as well.
Excellent. Ryan, thank you so much for the book. We were talking before we came live about a number of things that where there's lessons in the book that people have actually, you said that you know that they've actually used them to actually make their lives better. What was the inspiration behind the book?
So for much of my career, there were moments that jumped out at me where I did something well or I did something not well at all, where I learned a lesson that was impactful to my life. And I often use those lessons when speaking to Marines. If I was asked to come and speak to a group of Marines at any forum, I would pull from those lessons. And over time, I wouldn't capture them right away, but over time, I'd have these moments where a lesson would pop in my head. So I started keeping track in the notes page on my iPhone. And it started gnawing at me that I wanted to get what was in my head on paper, because I thought that the lessons that I learned were something that could be useful to those in the military, but even more importantly, to those in everyday life. Anybody in any walk of life can take the lessons that many people who serve learn, and sometimes we learn it pretty hard. But even though the story might be dramatic, the lesson can be used in anybody's life. So that was really the driving force. And also, I can't leave out the fact that a big part was also to download what was in my head onto paper for my son Joey. It was at the very least, the only person who's going to read the manuscript that I wrote was my son. I would consider it a victory, and I now have a published book, and I'm able to share it with the world. So I've succeeded more than just my initial goal, but really using my lessons help other people.
Okay, let's start with the title of the book, Readback. In military aviation, a readback is a safety protocol where you repeat instructions to ensure nothing is lost in translation. Why did you choose that specific concept as the framework for your navigating life's hardest lessons?
So you really hit on the primary aspect of Readback, and as a Cobra pilot, an attack helicopter pilot, it's very important that we're communicating with ground forces if we're operating in close proximity to ground forces, that you know where the friendlies are and where the enemies are, and there's mandatory readbacks that come and attack briefs that we give, which you highlighted there. So that is ingrained in me in my entire career as an aviator. And there's two other layers to Readback. Another one is whether you're the senior person in the room or you're talking to another senior person, a general officer, a colonel, whoever it might be. There's times when the tasks that you're talking about are in a longer conversation, and sometimes the conversations can meander. And this isn't just my own technique; many people do it. But oftentimes, if I wasn't sure when I was walking out of the room with a senior leader, that I knew what it is that I was going to do. If my task wasn't clear, I would ask if I could read back what I think they told me. And that allowed me to clarify whatever it was I was going to go do. And in some situations at different levels in the military, you may not get in front of your boss for another day or a week or a month. And if you spend a week or a month not moving in the right direction, you're either not accomplishing your mission or you're putting people's lives at risk. So there's a read back there. And then the final part would be that this is in keeping with those first two reasons. This is a read back on my career. I'm giving back what lessons I learned to the people who are going to pick them up. So that's Readback, 3 layer.
Thank you. You spent 25 years in the Marine Corps flying AH-1 Cobra attack helicopters. Can you take us into the cockpit for a moment, where a specific high-stress memory from your 4 deployments to Iraq that fundamentally changed how you view decision making?
There's so many to go down. Um, there's one I'll talk about in one of the missions we do as attack helicopter pilots is we escort the assault support aircraft, the transport helicopters, from one place to another in many different mission sets. One of them is in casualty evacuation. So we would either chase Army Black Hawk helicopters, the 60s, or Marine CH-46s, at least at this point in time when we still had them. And one of the missions that we were going on was a nighttime mission in support of the CH-46s from the base we were at to another base that had a higher level of care, a better hospital. And there was one mission that was trying to go for hours a day. They're trying to send us, but the weather just wasn't right. And right as about the sun was setting, they sounded the alarm, the horn went off, we ran to our aircraft, and we started flying in chase of that 46 aircraft. The weather was getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, and we were just chasing. And typically you fly in a more spread formation. You're not super close to the people you're with, just in case someone shoots. You don't want to be able to get both aircraft or have a better shot at you. But it was one of those moments where the ability to work as a team, I was flying with one of my best friends, and working as a team together, using all of our training, using all of our situational awareness, we were doing everything we could in the cockpit to stay airborne, to stay in position and go from one place to another. It wasn't a dynamic shooting. It wasn't, we weren't shooting, they weren't shooting back at us. It was a bad weather day, very, very limited visibility. We just needed to make sure that he and I worked as a team at every second of the flight. There was no relaxing. There was no laying back a little bit and just, coasting through the flight. Every moment was making sure we kept them safe, we stayed in position, and we got to where we needed to go. And it really was one of those moments when you land, sometimes see in the movie when the airplanes land and everybody gets out and hugs each other. We really did. Like, you almost want to kiss the ground and hug each other. But that was a high stress moment that wasn't involving like enemy fire, where we had to use every aspect of our training to work together every second to make sure we accomplished the mission and got the individual who needed medical attention from where they were to where they needed to be to save their life.
In the book, you talk about a vignette from your early days as officer candidate school, where you were terrified of falling out of a formation march. Why was that fear of falling short early on so pivotal for the leadership philosophy later as a colonel?
Yeah, so the term fallout means, well, there's a couple different terms, but in the purpose of the book, to fall out of a formation, whether it's a forced march or a run, if you slowly start to fall out of the group, it shows a sign of weakness. It shows your inability to keep up. And as a leader in any way, whether you're an enlisted leader or an officer, if you aren't able to stay with a formation, figuratively or literally, if you can't keep up and you show that the fact that you're going to fall behind, you start to lose the respect of the team. And it doesn't mean that if you fall out in one instance, your career is over. That's not the point. But for me, I had times where I was struggling physically, and I was in good shape. I was a collegiate athlete. I was able to run, but there were times when I was really hurting. And I would look around and I would wonder, like, am I the only one who's having this difficulty? Is this the only challenge just for me? And in those situations, typically when you look around, you see that the people who are better at running than you, they're struggling. The people are the same level of physicality, they're struggling. And even more important, if you look around, there might be people who are less athletic than you in a physical situation, and they're struggling, but they're not falling out either. So it gives you that mental ability to continue pushing. If everybody else is doing it, you are as good as the people around you. Why are you even thinking that you're not going to continue? It's going to push you forward. And that mentality isn't just in a formation run or through the woods of Quantico, Virginia. That mentality of looking around and finding strength in others is something really important and allows you to step forward and lead in a better way, and also ensure that those around you are able to keep up as well.
There is a common stereotype that senior military officers have to be bulletproof and stoic, yet you are incredibly candid about your own internal voice, the one that has told you since childhood that you're not good enough. How do you lead hundreds of Marines when that voice is whispering in your ear?
Yeah, that's a good one. So part of writing the book was and talking about that internal voice was important to me to humanize the fact that whether you think someone is bulletproof or not, everybody has challenges, everybody has struggles, everybody came from a certain place where things were not perfect, whether they seem to be perfect or not. And I think there's two levels to this. That voice that told me I'm not good enough drove me to be the best I possibly could be. And even though it was still speaking on my shoulder, it made me want to be better and work really hard. So that is an important part of who I am. And the other part too is that if you can recognize that you have your own insecurities, then you can look around, up, cross, or down. Everybody has things that they're struggling with, and it allows you to have, when you're able and when required, to have the human nature inside of you seen in others and understand that everybody's having struggles. So if somebody's challenged in some way, shape, or form, it may be because they didn't prepare, or it may be because there's something else going on. And that's part of the Marine Corps, where we're going to drive hard, we're going to expect a lot of people, but we also take care of each other. We're also looking out to make sure that everybody's welfare is taken care of. So there's an aspect of identifying in yourself and in other people that there are unseen challenges that may be affecting their ability to accomplish the job.
So Readback isn't just about the battlefield. It's also about, you open up about the trenches of everyday life, including your own personal battles. And how did your military training prepare you for those personal crises, and where did it fall short?
I would say there's a level of action that happens in the mind of most military people. I think of it as flipping the switch, right? There's the thought of, or the phrase, it's run to the sound of chaos. That's a typical thing for the Marines, or the concept of embrace the suck, where you just know that something is going to be difficult and you start moving. I think for everyday life, there's an aspect of, in the military, Marine Corps specific, we're already like, the switch is almost halfway flipped. You're already almost taking action. And if you have a bias for action and you can move out in uncertainty, you're able to accomplish so much more. There's the ability to avoid the hesitation to, in normal life, to say the first word in a hard conversation with your spouse, to step off and jump off the diving board that you're scared of jumping off of, or to make a decision in business or in life that you're really churning in your head and you're wondering the pros and the cons. Should I, shouldn't I? At some point in time, flip the switch, take the first step, move out. And that's a huge aspect of what we learn in the Marine Corps, that we're always kind of leaning towards the movement. And so if you can take that quick action, it allows you to get after whatever it is your goals are in life without stalling for too long.
You noted in the book that you noted that you wrote the book partly as a way of providing 22 lessons. What do you think is the most difficult, or what was the most difficult to actually put down on paper?
So I would say the hardest one for me to write was really talking about where I knew my career had plateaued. I knew that the point in time in my career where one report on my performance was below the level at which I would continue on an upward progression, or it'd be a little more difficult. And that was, aside from talking about the voice that I'm not good enough, that's in my ear, I'd say that was the most difficult one, because that really opened me up to something that most people don't talk about in military, in what your paperwork says and where you were. So not throwing stones at the individuals who wrote the report for the reasons they did, but that was really hard for me to even think through, and then get on paper, and then even more difficult to publish for the world to read, because that's a pretty raw aspect of my career and where I ended up. And I'm extremely happy to be where I am. I don't know that I go back and change anything, but it still was a very difficult aspect of my career, because that in my view, that was one of my failures, is I wasn't able to be at least in the running for whatever the next step might be.
You talk actually quite a lot about the importance, if you want to get promotion, how you get promotion. And that's actually instant translation. You can translate that into the private sector and the commercial world. You make a really compelling point in the book that people should actively test their own religious, political, or cultural beliefs by considering the humanity of those outside their enclosed circles. How did your global deployments, particularly in Indo-Pacific and the Middle East, shape that perspective?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because I've been I've deployed many times, and I've spent a lot of time in Asia, and I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And the concept that you're bringing up is the concept of walking around the fighting hole. It's something one of my bosses said often, and really in the military sense, the very tactical sense, you literally dig a fighting hole and you see your position and your vantage point of the enemy. When you walk around the fighting hole, you look at your position from the enemy's perspective, and you're identifying weaknesses. You're identifying things you need to improve, and you're testing whether or not your viewpoint is accurate. And that's a very military tactical way to look at things. But when you take that outside the military and look at a much broader view, I think in today's world, there are many people, and I'm not choosing any side of a political spectrum or a religious spectrum. There are many people who get laser focused on their belief system, and then that's the only belief system that works. Or they get laser focused on that one thing that you're talking about that day, the sports team, whatever it might be. And if you can look at the world from the perspective of others, whether it's from a deployment to the Middle East or Asia, or just the person who lives down the street from you, if when you're thinking about somebody else's viewpoint or somebody else's actions, if you can stop and look at it from their point of view, the actions they took to have that view or make that decision, if you can understand why they made the decisions they make or have the beliefs they have, then you can give them grace, right? Because they came to it in a thoughtful way that's different than yours, and you don't have to agree with them. In the military sense, walk around the fighting hole gives you an advantage over the enemy to kill the enemy. That's not the point of walk around the fighting hole in this conversation. You might reinforce your beliefs because you still think they're wrong, or you may broaden your view of the world, and you don't have to agree with them. But if you can understand their perspective, then you can have a conversation with anybody about anything at any time and still see the humanity in everybody, because no matter what you believe, what you think, we're all humans. We're all working hard to be, everybody's working hard to be the best they possibly can. And the sense of walking around the fighting hole will allow you to give grace to people when, if you didn't, you may just think they're wrong because you feel a different way.
You talk about the difference between learning from your own mistakes versus learning from the mistakes of others. As an executive coach now, what is the common leadership mistake you see civilian CEOs making that a Marine squadron commander would catch instantly?
Sorry, I lost you on the front side. Say that question again.
Okay, yeah, Readback. Yeah, you talk about the difference between learning from your own mistakes versus learning from the mistakes of others. As an executive coach now, what is the common leadership mistake you see civilian CEOs making that a Marine squadron commander would catch instantly?
So I think there's an aspect of allowing for people to identify mistakes that were made and allow the mistake not to be the zero defect. You make the mistake and you're done. Like, have grace, but also teach people, create a culture that if someone makes a mistake and they own the mistake and come to you with corrections to move forward, I think that's probably the best thing we can do, translating from military to civilian life in this conversation, is identify and create a culture where you're able to give people the power to identify the problem, whether it's their mistake or not, come up with a solution and move forward without having a situation where people are in fear of making a mistake and pointing fingers at others, because then you start to have pockets of angst among different team members and you lose the ability to kind of work together as a full team.
You stated that this book, this is the last question. You stated that this book is meant to be a historical record for your family, a guide for service members, and an encouragement for civilians. When your son reads this book years from now, what is the single greatest truth you hope he takes away from his father's journey?
That's a heavy one. So I think there's a couple different layers here. So I really wanted him to see inside my head of like who I was, and really help him see maybe what shaped what I did, why I was gone for so long at times. I mean, we moved home and I retired when he was 11, and he lived in 7 places. He'd seen a lot of the world, and he'd been pulled around as a military kid for a long time. But I wanted to see that. I want to see who I am as a man, and allow him to pick and choose the traits that he sees in me as his dad, and compare them to the traits that he saw in me in the book, and find a way to meld those together to allow him to have tools that he can use to decide how he will live his life, the decisions he'll make going forward.
Excellent. Ryan Cherry, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Readback, a Marine Aviator's Manual for Navigating Life's Hardest Lessons. If I wanted to buy a copy of this, where could I get one from?
So the easiest place to find it is on Amazon right now. So just search Readback and Ryan Cherry, and it'll pop right up. So you can get the ebook or the hard copy, but Amazon's easiest. Otherwise, you could go to Amplify Publishing Group, which is my publisher. And if you want a copy signed, then shoot me a note on LinkedIn, and I will sign it and send it your way.
And you told me, didn't you, before we went live, that you got #1 on Amazon yesterday?
Absolutely. So just this morning, big news for me. Readback hit #1 bestseller on Amazon. So really excited to have the support I've had from those who have purchased the book, who have commented on it, who have led reviews, and given me feedback, given me a readback on what they took away from the book. Really
excellent. And Ryan, where can we find information about you?
So once again, you can go to ryancherry.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Cherry.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about the book. There's so many great leadership examples in here, Ryan. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing them with us today.
Appreciate it.